The new 24-inch iMacs with Apple Silicon are out. Maybe you've heard about that. Well, now that I have my hands on one, let's get my first impressions of this brand new mid-tier 2021 iMac. Hey, I'm Jerry, and a couple of weeks ago I had a video where I said that the new iMacs were slightly disappointing after they were announced at the Apple event. It's too early to tell if they are disappointing, but I have to admit they are interesting, and interesting in a few different ways. So let's just start with the unboxing. First off, this iMac by itself only weighs less than 10 pounds, but inside the box, it feels enormous. The thing is way heavier than you would expect from a 9.8 pound iMac or whatever it is. And when you open up the box, you'll see that the iMac actually sits upside down in the box, which was kind of crazy. And because the iMac is so light, you can pretty much just pull it out of the box with one hand, no problem. Underneath the iMac, you have all of the usual accessories, including a new braided USB-C to Lightning cable to charge your keyboard and mouse. You have the new braided power adapter, which in this mid-tier iMac also includes an Ethernet port. There's the color-matched Magic Keyboard now with Touch ID, and I went with the Magic Mouse option. I'm not going to be spending much time on the Magic Keyboard in this video. I already did an overview of how this Magic Keyboard works with the new iMac and how you can even pair that to another M1 Mac in this video right up here. So definitely check out that video if that's something you want to see. Also interesting with this iMac is that there's more plastic or more film on this computer than I've ever seen unboxing another Mac before. You have a cover over the whole thing. You have a screen protector. You have plastic on the back side, and you have a plastic film all the way around the outer edge of the new iMac. All right, so obviously the first thing you're gonna notice about this iMac probably is the new colors. I didn't like the colors on the website. I didn't like the colors in the presentation. I am not really a fan of the pastel colors, but I have to admit, they do look a bit better in person. I mean, that orange really does pop. The orange on the back that you'll never ever see unless you put the back of the iMac facing the center of a room like Apple apparently thinks that most people will do. I will not, I'll never see this, so I'm stuck seeing the more pastel colors. But I will admit, and I'm surprised, that they're not as hideous in person as I thought they were going to be. And along with the colors, this thing is thin, like super thin, like unbelievably thin for a full all-in-one computer. Although you shouldn't be surprised when it's running Apple Silicon with the M1, it's basically a MacBook Pro and a MacBook Air in a desktop form. So at this point, we shouldn't be surprised, but it's still somehow surprising. And just for comparison, it's a bit thicker than the Gen 2 Apple Pencil, and it's just a tiny tad bit thicker than the iPhone 12 Pro with the Apple Silicone MagSafe case. The next thing you're probably gonna notice is the display, right? The whole thing is a display. It's a display with a computer attached, and it's 4.5K, which means it's somewhere between 4K and 5K. So what I take from that is it's essentially the exact same pixels per inch as the previous 4K 21-inch iMac and the previous 5K 27-inch iMac, just a little bit bigger on the sheet of paper that they cut it out from. And just like previous iMacs, it has a max brightness of 500 nits. It's Retina, so it looks good, it looks clear. It has True Tone to change the color of the white balance, but this display, this new iMac, does not have HDR playback capability like the previous 2020 27-inch iMac. Other than that, the display is pretty much identical to the previous generation iMacs. It looks good. There's not a lot to complain about, so yeah. Now, wrapped around the whole display is, of course, those white bezels, which have drawn so much controversy. I am not a fan of white bezels. A lot of people are not a fan of white bezels, but there are lots of people that like them and think they look really good. Maybe they look better compared to the pastel colors, compared to what would be a black bezel. Jury's still out on that one for me. But I will say that the bezels don't look as bad when you have True Tone turned on the display. True Tone, of course, adjusts the white balance of things depending on the ambient light in the room, which the white bezels do themselves without any technology. There's just white against reflecting whatever light is in the room. So with True Tone on the display settings, it more closely matches it. But when you have True Tone turned off, like if you're trying to do any color editing or anything like that, then the bezels look a bit grimy or muddy, kind of dingy. And it's hard to tell if it's going to have any effect on color work. I haven't done any editing on this computer yet, but I'll let you know in a future video if it's something that does distract me or if it's something that I just kind of get used to. One other thing about the white bezels is that it's a full sheet of glass on the front of the iMac from top to bottom. There's no gap between these colors here. It's just a big sheet of glass. And light does get into the sides of the glass on the iMac. So if you have a light behind your iMac or directly above it shining down, you're going to get this light bleed that kind of goes a little bit into the bezels. I'm not sure how it's going to affect anything I do or how I feel about the iMac, but that's just something that I noticed already. On the top of the iMac, it's pretty much just flat with 2 holes for the microphones. And on the bottom, you have the grills for the speakers and the fans. Now, I do like the design of the stand. I like the structure of the stand. I like the little heel in the back of the stand. I think it looks really nice. The iMac does tilt back quite a bit on this stand, but unfortunately there still is no height adjustment on this iMac stand. Now, I did notice something related to the low weight of the iMac. The first one is adjusting the display. The second one I'll get to in just a moment. But when you adjust this display, because the iMac is so light and there's really no grip on the bottom of the iMac, the feet are just 2 slick little sled-like things. It just moves when you try and move the display. So it will slide right around your desk. So you have to be very careful about that. The white bezels do help with tilting the display because you're not going to see fingerprints. But other than that, it's kind of stiff and it will move. So something to be aware of. And now the new power cable that connects magnetically to the back of the Mac has power and Ethernet pass-through. I was kind of negative on this design of the Ethernet built into the power brick, but after using it and testing it and making sure that there's no added latency or anything like that, I actually think it's a pretty smart design. I would really like to see additional ports come to the power brick and then these power bricks be available for other Macs as well. I'd love to be able to get a power brick that attaches to a MacBook Pro or Mac Mini even that has Ethernet and USB and Thunderbolt and some other things just built right into the power brick. That can make organization a bit easier. Now, the other issue with the weight of the iMac is that that cable is really attached. If you want to disconnect that cable, it takes quite a bit of force to remove it from the back of the iMac. You can do it really fast and disconnect the cable, and that's fine. But if you have the back of the iMac facing the front of the room, like Apple's expecting you to do, and somebody walks by and trips on the cord, and it's a slow trip, like somebody's like hopping along because they can't catch their balance and their foot's tied around the cord, it is going to pull the iMac right off of the desk. That's just something to consider, and maybe you don't want the back of your iMac and the cord hanging out whatever side is facing the middle of your room. As far as ports go on this mid-tier iMac, there's 2 Thunderbolt ports and 2 USB-C ports on the back, along with the power/Ethernet. For 90% of people, these 4 ports would be enough for them. Now, you may need some kind of adapter, docks, or dongles to be able to connect other devices that you want to connect that aren't USB-C or Thunderbolt, but there's at least enough ports for most people to get by. And then there's also a headphone jack on the left side of the iMac. All right, next up are microphone and camera on the new 24-inch iMac. They are pretty good. Actually, check this out. Wow, so disregard the mess back here. Overall, this camera is very bright and very clear compared to my previous 2020 iMac. Like, just looking at it on the screen, you can see a very clear, distinct advantage of this camera on this 24-inch iMac over the previous 2020 iMac. Even though this one had a 1080p camera and it was supposedly very good, this one just seems to blow it out of the water. And the studio mics on here, you be the judge. How does it sound? I'm not using any external microphone. I'm only using the built-in the built-in microphones on this 24-inch iMac. So let me know below, what do you think of it? Apple also spent a lot of time talking about the new speaker system in the 24-inch iMac. It's a 6-speaker system that has 2 force-canceling subwoofers on each side of the iMac along with a tweeter. Of course, I opened up Spotify, started playing some of my songs, and generally, things sound pretty good. I did think that the iMac sounded a little quiet compared to my 2020 27-inch iMac, so I did a test. And using the noise meter thing on the Apple Watch, sitting about 20 inches away from both the 27-inch iMac and the 24-inch iMac, I got about 80 decibels playing the same song from the 27-inch iMac and only about 73 decibels coming from the 24-inch iMac. It's a pretty noticeable difference in the amount of volume that you're getting out of this iMac versus the previous generation. Hey, during the editing, I was trying to get some footage of my Apple Watch showing the difference between the new iMac and the old iMac, and the new iMac was much louder for some reason this test than it was a few hours ago when I first tested it. I checked that the volume was all the way up when I first tested it. I was going back and forth. I tried multiple songs, and each time the new iMac was not as loud as the old iMac. But in my most recent test, I can't seem to get much of a difference. So the new iMac sounds great. It sounds loud. I'm not sure what the deal was. Performance-wise, this iMac runs the M1 chip. We're pretty familiar with the M1 performance at this time from the MacBook Pro, the MacBook Air, and the Mac Mini. And this is no different. This benchmarks very closely to the previous M1 machines. As you can see with both Geekbench and Cinebench, this 24-inch iMac with M1 beats out the Intel i7 iMac on single-core performance. The i7 iMac barely beats out the 24-inch iMac with multi-core Geekbench scores, and of course the graphics on the i7 iMac are about twice as fast as the 8-core built-in graphics on the M1. As far as disk speed, I'm getting a very consistent 2,900 megabytes per second, both read and write on this new iMac. Overall, it's a pretty good first impression, and this is an interesting machine. It feels fast, has a refreshed design for 21, and has some new features like Touch ID on the Magic Keyboard and of course Ethernet built into the power brick. I'm excited to test out this new mid-range iMac against the baseline iMac and of course my 2020 27-inch iMac, so hit subscribe if you're interested in seeing those upcoming videos. Also, if you want to see my walkthrough of this new Magic Keyboard with Touch ID, then check out this video right over here. Hit the thumbs up button if you liked it, and I'll see you next time.